Marc was a very strange guy. I mean, he had all these qualities. He was instinctively brilliant. He was arrogant. He was narcissistic. He was self-centered. He was generous. He was kind-hearted.
I thought he was very interesting. I thought he was very charming. I thought he was different.
He was very outgoing. He had this kind of showbiz aura about him, even before he was famous.
He was driven from his early age. He wanted to be a star. He wanted to be a rock and roll star. He knew he had talent.
He was extremely ambitious, and he was very sort of calculating. I think he had a very good instinct for the market.
I learned later that he was also prone to exaggeration, and just making up complete blatant lies to further his career.
There's Marc Bolan, the rock star, which is a facade. Then there was Marc Feld, who I actually got to know at one stage, who was quite insecure and introvert.
I met Marc in my office at Melody Maker in Fleet Street, and I remember seeing this guy wandering around the corridor with corkscrew hair. And at that point we went for a chat and a drink in our local pub, and he explained to me that he was forming a band. And I said, well, how many people in the band? 2. It was just going to be him and a guy called Steve Peregrine Took. And I said, well, have you got your equipment together? He said, oh yes, we bought it all at Woolworths.
I had a brief from my boss to find a band of my own to produce. And until that time, I was my boss's assistant. My boss was Denny Cordell, famous record producer who produced Joe Cocker and The Move and people like that. So I opened up a copy of International Times, and I just looked to see who was playing that night. And there was this group called Tyrannosaurus Rex, and I remember seeing their name week after week. So it was my very first night of talent scouting. And I went to the pub and waited until 8 o'clock until the band was advertised to go on. And I walked down the stairs, and I could hear the music coming up through the stairwell. And I thought it was very unusual. It wasn't rock music, it was kind of folky. And Marc Bolan was playing with Steve Peregrine Took, sitting on the floor, sitting on a carpet. And I was mesmerized. And yes, I did speak to him that night, and I was deferred to him by Steve Peregrine Took because I wasn't even sure that Marc could speak English. I didn't even know he was singing in English.
People either loved it or hated it. They couldn't understand Marc's vocal style. He had this very high-pitched, whinnying, sort of bleating vocals, which turned some people off, but others got into it.
I mean, I quite like the idea of the folky thing. There he was sitting cross-legged and strumming his guitar and singing these very sort of very pleasant ditties. I mean, they were very sort of catchy, easy, and slightly cosmic.
He was very poetic, and also, the lyrics of the music. I think he was very, innovative, but then also was very basic and vague in a sense. But there was probably a lot more meaning there. But I think where he found his, it was like the sensuality of the expression of the words.
Touch girl at the marshes, a kiss is a whip of the moon. Dance is a dancing to the hum of a sunny June. Oh, elemental child. Oh, yeah, elemental child.
I asked him if I could produce his records. I told him I was a record producer and I worked for Denny Cordell. And he said, well, you're the 7th or 8th record producer who came this week to see us. I don't know who I'm going to go with, but John Lennon was here last night, and I'll probably go with him. And I went, oh, Okay, and I believed him. I turned around dejected, and he said, "Wait a minute, can I have your phone number?" I went to work the next day. I got there about 10 a.m. and I told my boss that I saw this fantastic group. I described them in detail, and he put his arms behind his head and he was listening pensively, and the phone rang, and it was about 10:30 by this time, and it was Marc Bolan phoning from the street. And he said, "Steve and I just happened to be in the neighborhood. Could we come up and audition for Denny Cordell?" They came into the office with this carpet rolled up with some string around it, an acoustic guitar with no case, and it had no G-string peg either. I mean, they were really, ragamuffins, these two. And they laid out their carpet, sat on the carpet, and went through the entire set. They just didn't play one or two songs. They just didn't stop singing for about 35, 40 minutes. And Denny was enthralled, and so was I. I couldn't believe that this was happening, that they would prefer us over John Lennon. So that was the audition. It was quite an amazing experience.
Tyrannosaurus Rex were different. Nobody else was really doing an acoustic duo. There was the uniqueness of the songs and the material. However, at the same time, it's quite firmly rooted in its time. I have to admit, I find most of the first album certainly is virtually unlistenable.
Like all first albums, Marc was in good shape and the songs were in great shape. I mean, he had been writing them for years, and now here was his chance to record them. So it really didn't take that long to do the basic tracks. Right after we'd finish a song, instead of proceeding to the next song, they'd pick up the instruments, the overdub instruments, or do doo-wops, do backup vocals and all that. And we'd finish the song. Each song would be finished within an hour, and then we would proceed to the next song. So within the first 2 days, we did the entire 14 songs, including a single that didn't appear on that album called Deborah. Deborah was the first Tyrannosaurus Rex single. We managed to do Deborah and a B-side, and so 16 tracks in all, including a visit from John Peel, who came to the studio and he read a short story that Marc had written. We did all this stuff in 2 days. And then we spent the next 2 days mixing. So it worked out really good. Everything was just right. I mean, getting John Peel not only to read the story, but also to be the champion of Tyrannosaurus Rex was just godsend.
He had a very close friendship with Marc, which I think started simply through Marc sending him early tapes and things of Tyrannosaurus Rex, knowing that John was a champion of the underdog, knowing that John was somebody who'd get behind young, precocious talent.
When he had a disco, John Peel disco, playing records, that's what some of us do, he would insist that Tyrannosaurus Rex were on the bill. And then he'd split the dosh. Beautiful cat.
The first albums were great fun. They were very good. I liked them, actually. A lot of people were charmed by them. And he did seem to be doing quite experimental music.
Both Marc and I were learning how to make records. We didn't quite get it right yet. We thought this Tyrannosaurus Rex, only because it's different, it's going to sell millions of records, because it's unusual. And little did I know, and little did he know, that you have to meet the public at least halfway. So I would say, if anything, Marc learned how to simplify his writing and make lyrics that were more understandable and come up with melodies and sounds that were more familiar.
Tyrannosaurus Rex were a pretty successful band on the underground scene. The first single, Deborah, just narrowly failed to make the top 30. The second single, 1 Inch Rock, got to something like number 28. They quickly developed a strong following.
Tyrannosaurus Rex.
On a qui?
Ti quoi?
I saw Tyrannosaurus Rex playing at all the big festivals, like, for example, the ill-fated 1968 Isle of Wight Festival, which was turned into a bit of a disaster for everybody because a great gale blew up. And then poor Tyrannosaurus Rex had to come on and perform in the freezing cold, and you could barely see Marc because he would always squat on his haunches, and with Steve next to him rattling on the bongos, it was very hard to actually see them at all.
I said to him that I thought he should really think about whether he shouldn't, go electric, so that he could stand up so that people could see him, low stage, sitting down, no one, and people standing up, no one beyond the first 3 rows could see him. So I thought, well, if you stood up, that might help. If you had an electric guitar, you better amplify it so people would better hear it. And, isn't that a good idea? No, that wasn't a good idea. It was ignored completely.
One of the most important figures in his early career, somebody that really can't be given enough credit, was his wife, was June, because she was a very smart cookie.
I bought this whole thing as to who he was and what he was and what it was about, and it was about the kids, man. It was really beautiful, and everything is lovely, and we're moving on a higher plane. And then he started having a romance with our secretary, called June Child.
And she describes him somewhere as looking like a combination of Bob Dylan and Biggles. And she sort of fell in love with him almost at first sight.
She wasn't doing anything because she was sort of sitting there looking into his eyes, and he was sitting there looking into her eyes and sitting cross-legged and playing guitar to her. Or, it was like, oh no, this is just sickening. So we said, look, June, you can do one of 3 things. You can leave and go off and live with Marc and just get on with your life. You can stay with us, which is our preferred solution, but be professional, so that of course you can do phone calls and things, but let's not have any snogging in the office. Or you can you can look after Marc within the office, but all in the context of in other words, you can stay as our assistant, but you can be in charge of looking after Marc. So that evening, a note came through the door, the note that I have always regretted losing. And it said, I'm going to leave because I can't have you messing with my art by telling me to go electric. Words to that effect. Very small note, torn off of an envelope, put through the door. And in hindsight, you have to say, well, that was probably an excuse. He thought, right, June is the person who does all the work. She does it. I don't need these old geezers in the back. I'm paying them money. If I pay June, I'm paying myself money. We can do it ourselves.
She knew about promotion and about getting people on the road. And it was her energies and togetherness that actually got him moving as Tyrannosaurus Rex, and she did a lot of hard work.
She was his mother, his wife, his lover, his secretary. She did everything. Stability. She enabled him to write and to be creative.
Marc was quite a self-contained little unit, really, and in the early days he was quite broke. He had the support of June, his wife, and they lived together in a tiny flat in Blenheim Crescent. Marc's studio, which was very funny, it was in the corner, there was a little curtain, and it said in handwriting, like a child's handwriting, Toadstool Studios, they said. And in this little booth was a microphone and a tape recorder and a guitar, and that's where Marc wrote his songs and got it all together. And I remember actually sitting with Marc one evening, and he gave me a pair of bongos, so I was Steve Peregrine Took for half an hour.
Marc did believe in the dream of why people had sky in their hair, but now they wear stars on their brow. I mean, he did believe in that kind. He read Hermann Hesse. I don't think he ever understood Hermann Hesse, but he read him. He read Tolkien, which I think he did understand at least to some extent. But I'm not sure that the dream of Elvis was very far from his mind.
I always thought Marc was special, Once I hipped to what the vibe was, I thought he was a very special cat. And, you know, my job was to propagate him, and a bit of head holding, a bit of hand holding, you know. A lot of it is playing the right records to people, you know. And Marc would be at home saying, listen to this beep, you know, and he'd play an Elvis bootleg. The Elvis bootleg is called I Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star, you know, and he'd be playing Ricky Nelson records with amazing James Burton guitar solos, you know. So it had to get rocking, you know, it had to get rocking.
I try to call my baby, try to get a date. Oh, says no dice, kid, you got a baby. Sometimes I wonder what I'm gonna do, but there ain't no cure for the summertime blues.
The main thing would be an electric guitar. And we were naive enough to think that the switch over just to an electric guitar would be it. You know, we had no drum kit, we had no bass guitar, we had no backing vocals like that you would hear on a record of the time. So, but you know, we thought, okay, that's what was missing, the electric guitar.
The third album, Unicorn, they started expanding the sound by bringing in electric guitar. Tony Visconti played piano on a song, and they started building up the sound.
I went to see him with Steve Took in Tyrannosaurus Rex at the Albert Hall, and I think he was support for The Who. And he played a bit of electric guitar. And I thought, wow, his guitar playing's coming on, you know. And I went backstage afterwards and I said to him, hey, well done, Marc, you know, you're really playing well now, you know. And he said, yeah, no Jimi Hendrix though. And then he went over to his guitar and he struck a match and pretended to set fire to his guitar, which he knew would get me because I was the guy who came up with the idea for Hendrix setting fire to his guitar.
Perhaps on Unicorn was the first time that we actually saw, this is really good. This is we're going in the right direction, because we emulated the Beach Boys a lot. I know it's very hidden, but I know exactly what we were listening to at the time. But we still didn't crack it. There were no hits off Unicorn, although to me it's one of the most pleasing, and it's probably the best Tyrannosaurus Rex album.
It's okay doing acoustic music, although gradually it was becoming more electrical, but you need, in the studio, you need the expertise of somebody who knows what they're doing with the faders, really. And Tony Visconti could do that.
Anyone in Marc's setup who had any kind of aggressive personality was eliminated. Steve Peregrine Took was the first one who kind of wanted to assert himself. He wanted to share an equal amount of songs on the album. That was the real breakup of Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Steve Took was one of these guys who had a lot of talent, but in the end basically was never going to be a person to really get it together.
Steve Peregrine Took was a hippie. If you told Steve Peregrine Took to like go mad, you know, do anything you want, he would disappear for days and come up with something that would be so far out, and so he would out-Zappa Frank Zappa with his ideas. That was not the way we were going to sell pop records or millions of records.
Steve Took got very heavily into LSD and was into discovering the greater truth, which, you know, and Marc said to me, I'll never forget it, he said, I left him in a wardrobe in New York looking for God. And then Marc went looking for a new partner.
Mickey Finn was a rock and roller, and he was a real basic guy, a cool guy. I really liked him. And that was another missing element, that Marc needed a little bit of more grounding. He needed a bit more grounding, which Mickey Finn provided for him.
He knew Mickey Finn from somewhere before. They'd either worked together or he was on the scene around, and he saw him as a very good-looking kind of clothes horse figure that could do a little bit of back and look good. It was the look.
Mickey was the court jester who made Marc laugh, and made, you know, it was a feel-good factor.
I was tired of writing Tyrannosaurus Rex every day on my calendar. I can't even pronounce it. And I put T-Rex on like Monday, Tuesday, and I'd write T-Rex, T-Rex, T-Rex. And Marc came in one day and he saw that and he goes, "Hey man, I don't like that." He goes, "The name of the group's Tyrannosaurus Rex, man." And I said, "I'm sorry, Marc, but I'm going to get writer's cramp if I write Tyrannosaurus Rex for every month, every day of the month." So he went, "Okay," you know. And shortly afterwards, he changed the name to T-Rex.
Marc was very much a hero of the underground because all the hippies loved him, and you know, no hippie gig was complete without Tyrannosaurus Rex. So there were rumblings of discontent when he launched T-Rex and suddenly became this proto-rock star.
One week we were promised our very first front page on the Melody Maker. It would have been the first music paper front page. And the music papers were very important. You know, you had Melody Maker, NME, Sounds, Record Mirror. And it didn't happen. At the last minute it fell through, it was somebody else got on the cover, you know. And I was very upset. Marc said, "Don't worry, man, there's going to be plenty."
Marc was an opportunist who always wanted to be a star, and that's what sometimes I think people forget. And he always said it, he was quite open about it. "I want to be a rock and roll star, I want to be Elvis Presley, I want to be bigger than the Beatles," you know. And when he saw the opportunity to dump one aspect of it, he moved very swiftly on to the next stage, that was Ride a White Swan.
Ride a White Swan was our first big hit record. We were doing everything the same basically, but probably less of it. When you listen to that record carefully, it's very, very stripped down. There's one guitar, maybe two guitars. There's a little guitar overdub. There's a bass guitar. It's the first time we used bass on a T-Rex single. There's no drum kit. The rhythm is all in the guitar playing. And one main element that's different from all the rest is we added a string section, which was going to be a signature sound of T-Rex for at least the next 2 years.
I remember when Ride a White Swan was first released, and he started to get a little bit downhearted. And he was angry. I'd never seen him angry before. And he was very bitter that the radio weren't playing Ride a White Swan. And he was complaining that it wasn't going up the charts, and he really felt that it should do. He put everything into that record, and it meant an awful lot to him. But then, a couple of weeks later, miraculously, Ride a White Swan started to take off.
It got picked up, I think, by a couple of DJs, and it was a fluke hit.
There was no overnight success. We really worked hard for that. And we kind of floated around, you know, a couple of feet off the ground the rest of the day, and I don't think it really sunk in for about 2 or 3 days that we finally had a hit record.
That's when the team started to take a bit of interest in him. The young girls started to take interest in him, and he picked up on that quite quickly.
I always felt that Marc Bolan, though, he should be a rock and roller, because he was a rock and roller, so why not bloody well rock and roll? You know, bass, drums, hit the thing, let's go, plug in, let them scream, great.
Marc said, "I want to do this with a band." Finally, it was his decision. In the interim, we actually did a couple of gigs together. Because of Ride a White Swan, I did a few gigs on bass with T-Rex. And one day, you know, Marc realized I couldn't be the band's bass player because I was producing other people and I couldn't go on the road. And he said, "I found a guy called Steve Curry." So Steve joined the group first, and he was all set to play on the next single, which was Hot Love. And Marc needed a drummer.
Thank you.
Well, I was playing in a band in Southend called Legend, and we was making an album at Advision Studios, and the producer was Tony Visconti.
Now Bill, I always thought was a great drummer. He was very basic, and then when you wanted Bill to play a fill, it was that lovely, warm, slow, cascading Ringo Starr kind of fill. So I said to Marc, I think I found your drummer for the recording session. We were just booking Bill for 15 quid.
The funny thing about it was I went out and bought all the old Tyrannosaurus Rex albums, and I'd never heard of this, you know. And yet when I actually went to do the session, it was totally different.
She's my woman of gold, she's not very old. She's my woman of gold, she's not very old.
I just walked into the studio, said hi, and sat down and we did the songs. One was Woodland Lock and the other one was Hot Love. It was a very, very jolly atmosphere at the time, very expectant. And I think what happened was that Ride a White Swan, that was number 2. And he had high hopes for everything. I mean, it was all pretty new to me, but he looked pretty happy at the time. And Steve had just joined the band, and Mickey was dancing and tiptoeing around like he always does, you know. But yeah, it was a good atmosphere going on.
By the end of the session, Marc fell in love with Bill, and he said, you know, you're going to join my band, you're in my band. And he says, oh, okay, but I'm already in a band. He goes, nope, you're in my band. And what's your name? He goes, Bill Fifield. He goes, I don't like that. You're in a band called Legend. I'm going to call you Bill Legend. So that's how I dubbed the Bill Legend. It was really, really funny.
Steve Curry, the bass player, and Bill Legend, the drummer, they were lovely cats. But T-Rex wasn't, say, like the Beatles, you know, where it's more of a cooperative thing. It was Marc's band, but they were there by his choice. They were there because they were great for the job, and they were lovely geezers.
We had a couple of weeks rehearsal, and the next thing I remember was being in the 707 going to New York, first gig, Detroit, within a month.
That was the classic lineup, Mickey, Steve, Bill, some bloke called Marc. At that stage, it was fun to be with them. It was a family. You were all part of the family. All I mean, there was them. There was BP Fallon, and there was Mick O'Halloran and myself. We were all family in June, and they treated us like that.
Now was the time to seize the moment, and I think Marc took the chance, and in the process produced, along with Tony Visconti, one of the classic albums.
1, 2, buckle my shoe.
The Electric Warrior album was the first album that I played on, and it was during that first tour that we started to record it. Did a lot of stuff in Los Angeles. Get It On was recorded in Los Angeles. And so it was quite a defining time, really, with the band knitting together, getting an understanding and gelling.
You got the teeth of the hydra upon you. You're dirty, sweet, you're my girl. Get it on, bang a gong, get it on. Get it on, bang a gong, get it on.
Bill was a great drummer, and Steve was a great bass player. The two of them were probably one of the best rhythm sections that I've ever worked with. And when you hear those records, they were made, we didn't labor all day over one song. We would record about 6 songs in one day. They could just knock them out. You know, they were really hardcore, really good rock musicians.
We never rehearsed any of the stuff. I mean, you go in the studio and you didn't know what you was going to do. The songs would just be laid on you. And that, I think really in a way, that's why they were so potent and fresh.
But it all really doesn't matter at all. No, it all really doesn't matter at all. Life's a guide.
The Electric Warrior album I liked. I think it encapsulated the success of T-Rex and Marc's peak. as an artist, really.
A lot of the Marc vibe was to do with upfulness and fun and kind of sexy teasing kind of thing, you know? But it was done with a smile.
I've never thought it was anything other than trash. I mean, it's quite good trash, and one shouldn't be too much of a snob, I guess. But you know, it's not musically challenging. But you know, it was extremely influential, and it was a great noise. You know,
I don't think any of us really quite knew where we was going or what was happening. We was actually just doing stuff. I mean, whether Marc knew or not, I don't know. I don't think he did.
I just imagined this word T-Rex to see, you know, that big sort of flaming pie, T-Rex to see written on it, you know. And we put the word out, you know, you give it to people, you know, and they use it, and it becomes colloquialism, and it becomes what happens, and it did.
It was just wonderful to put out a T-Rex record and see it just go to #1 or enter the charts at 3 and be #1 next week.
Suddenly, overnight, he was a top 10 pop star, appearing on Top of the Pops and being screamed at and chased down the street by thousands of adoring fans.
You know, to be in a car with all these girls on top, and at one point we had to put our feet, like lie on the thing and put our feet up in the air to stop the car roof coming down, you know. And it was a mixture of exhilaration and terror.
I thought that he was the bopping elf, and that you know, when he turned into the superstar supremo, I was absolutely bowled over, and I was really annoyed that I wasn't getting the money. Some other bastards got the money.
There was a time when, you know, at Marc's apartment in Little Venice, that we used to crawl on the floor from room to room because the people outside could see us. And they were the girls, you know, and they would go completely bonkers, you know.
I think he was a big influence on the 70s because he was the first real glam rocker in the way he looked. Everybody else followed him, even Bowie.
He was the originator. He was the first person to ever appear on TV with a bit of glitter under his eye and things. I mean, he kind of like definitely launched that whole glam rock thing.
I don't think he went out to invent glam rock at all. That everybody else actually took it up, took the idea up. So he initiated it unknowingly, I think.
Listening back to T-Rex material nowadays, I would say that we weren't really that glam musically. We certainly started the movement with clothing. I think it was more of a social phenomenon. It was a fashion statement that Marc was making. The music is rockabilly, it's R&B, it's Chuck Berry revamped.
Steve and I, we were like working lads, you know, trying to keep everything steady and rock solid, and left the other two to dress up.
He found something, he believed in something, but he loved to have fun, and he put that energy into the music. He didn't take it for granted, but he wanted to rock, and he wanted to take it, you know, he took it strong, but, you know, it's a strange thing, because, like, that was considered pop music of the time, but compared to the pop music that's out now, there was so much more soul and depth to that, you know.
I'm a guitarist, I'm a bassist, and I write strings. I'm a backing vocalist, I could sing, and we used Flo and Eddie, who used to be with Frank Zappa, and they used to be the Turtles. We used them up until Get It On, and then afterwards they wanted to be paid. And Marc said, forget about it. I thought they were doing it just for the vibe. So we didn't use Flo and Eddie afterwards because Marc didn't want to pay them. And so he turned to me one day, say on Telegram Sam, and he said, "You can sing high, can't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I can sing falsetto, you know." So I took the place of Flo, and Marc took the place of Eddie. And all the backups you hear from Telegram Sam onwards are Marc and myself. None of the other group members could sing.
Telegram Sam was done first take, believe you me. I mean, we'd rehearsed it 3 or 4 times, and it was in Copenhagen. We got into the studio and we gone through the stuff. And I remember at the end of it, I wasn't all that, you know, convinced. And he said, "No, it's fine, you know." And we left it.
There's a whole string of tunes which you seem to be churning out almost to order, really.
When someone's at their peak and you every other week you're at Top of the Pops, and you're at Wembley you're the first band to sell at Wembley Arena since the Monkees and the Beatles. You know, in those days the capacity was 8,000, and we did 2 shows on a Saturday. You know, that's a highlight.
When the T-Rex thing was kicking in super treble mega, you know, you'd have kind of the Lord Mayor would come with his or her children, you know, into the dressing room wearing this big old chain thing, you know, and would invariably get stoned inadvertently because, you know, Marc didn't smoke jazz woodbines, but I certainly did, you know. And these people would go out there well wafted, you know, and then dig the gig.
This is the peak of T-Rextasy. We could do no wrong. The press hadn't turned on us yet. The singles were selling 20 to 50,000 copies a day. And you could see the look in Marc's eye, and everyone was just oozing with confidence.
Yes, you're my love. Oh, girl, I'm just a jeepster for
Marc Bolan change? Yeah, he changed. We all changed, you know. It's a wild thing to happen to one person. All this acclaim, people genuflecting in front of you, telling you that not only are you wildly successful, but you're a brilliant poet, and you're a brilliant this, and you're a brilliant that.
I think the arrogance, of course, started to come in around late 71, when the deal with Straight Ahead was ending.
Marc wanted total control of what he was recording, the business side of things, the financial side of things.
When Marc started his own record label, he seemed to be overburdened with too many things. It was, in the early days, he was just a recording artist, but now he was an entrepreneur, a record label CEO, and really having more meetings about money and the running of the company than actually having time to sit down and write.
The Slider album was on T-Rex label. Slider was basically recorded in France, maybe the Chateau de Rouville. I think it was recommended to Marc by Elton, who had done a Honky Chateau album over there. And we went over there on a couple of occasions for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and most of the tracks were done there.
with my Les Paul. I know I'm small, but I enjoy living anyway. I bought a car, it was old but kind. I gave it my mind and it disappeared.
I loved the Slider. It was like a continuation of Electric Warrior, really, with I don't know, there seemed to be more overdubs and stuff going on.
Being in the studio and hearing things like Telegram Sam and Metal Guru coming through and Slider, I got a buzz.
We started sounding glam around Metal Guru. That was kind of a glam sound, you know. It was very glossy and very crispy, and it was shiny and polished and all that.
You're gonna bring my baby to me.
At the time, we music critics tended to look down our nose a bit at Marc at this point for repeating himself. People started to think that Marc was just doing it like rock hits by numbers, you know.
The press built Marc up to destroy him. I mean, they built him up as they do everyone else. When he was on the way up, everyone was for him. And then all of a sudden he was at the top and, you know, people started sniping.
Marc did try to change the sound. It's noticeable that from the end of '72, the records are a lot harder.
With a song like Children of the Revolution, that was really down and dirty rock. You know, that wasn't so much pop anymore. That was a very, very heavy song.
You won't fool the children of the revolution. No, you won't fool the children of the revolution. No, no, no.
Album-wise, after The Slider, I don't think there was ever a great album.
Tanks was recorded very quickly. I think we possibly may have done 15 to 17 tracks in 3 days. Marc had a lot of ideas going through his head at the time, but I really loved Tanks. I think in hindsight, even more so now than then. I think because of all the rush and the hubbub that was going on at the time, you think, oh, everything's in a rush to get something out. But looking back, it's a lovely album. There's some beautiful songs on it.
By the time we made the album Tanks, a lot of the keyboard playing, the mellotron and even recorders and all that, that was me playing it. I was the member of the band who could play all the stranger instruments. And when you get the album and you read the credits, I challenged Marc. I said, why aren't my credits there? It's just produced by Tony Visconti. He says, well, I worked it out that your name would appear more times than mine. So I didn't feel like you should get more credit than me.
Tony used to go in the studio after Marc and retune Marc's guitars because they're always out of tune. And Tony would go in and afterwards and tune them to make sure they were right. And he would go in and clean up tapes afterwards, which after Marc had gone, you know, he really cared.
Everyone in the group had this kind of same passive personality. They were very subservient to Marc. I was the only person in the setup who could actually not really give it back to him, but I could tell him the truth. We would have debates. I knew he was the kind of artist that you couldn't twist his arm to make him do anything. He was terrified of losing face in front of people. If I had something to say to him, I realized I would have to take him out in the corridor and tell him very privately, even if it was his guitar being out of tune. If I told him his guitar was out of tune in front of other people, he would, you know, lash out at me and say, no, it isn't, you're crazy, you're deaf, or something like that.
I can remember we just coming back from a tour of the States, looking forward to like a fortnight at home, and the very next day I got a phone call saying that, because Marc had stayed in LA to do a TV thing, and he wanted us back there, so I go back to the airport the next day, do a 12-hour flight back just to go and mime for 3 minutes.
In a period where he had less time to be creative, he was really repeating himself. I had to come to that conclusion myself. It didn't go unaddressed. I would speak to him a lot about this. I said, you know, like Truck on Tyke, we didn't really go very far in a new direction. Like I think we used an oboe on the record. He would think by using another orchestral instrument, that would be enough to change the character of the record. But there's this little oboe tucked in the background, and that was just like the only difference between that and the 2 or 3 previous singles.
I got him for PR actually at the point in his career when he was actually on a bit of a downward path. Although Tanks didn't do too badly. I mean, it certainly caused a bit of controversy with the sleeve anyway, which people were claiming was obscene because he was sitting astride the barrel of a tank.
Well, the way Marc presented himself visually evolved. You know, there was even at one point the Fat Elvis period, you know, too many feather boas, you know, and just too much, you know.
Beep did have a kind of integrity factor, I would call it. You know, that he wanted things to be credible. Maybe he felt that they weren't anymore, I don't know. I think it might have been difficult if you were involved with Marc early on, you know, and that was the way you saw him going.
Beep and Marc created a monster. Keith Oldham had to try and control the monster.
He was always upset when if he didn't make number one, you know, but I mean, at the same time, I mean, in his mind, he would concoct a situation where he had done, you know. If it was top 10, it'd become top 3. If it was top 30, it was definitely in the top 20, you know. And after a while, he would believe in his own publicity, you know.
I would be privy to the record sales, and if we sold 20,000 records, he would phone me maybe later in that day and said, we sold 35,000 records that day. So I got used to this. Everyone got used to Marc just doubling the figures, lying about everything. But as I said, it was really harmless lies. It wasn't, you know, didn't hurt anybody.
There was one occasion when we had to go to his house in the King's Road. And I said, Marc, can we come around and discuss this tour situation, you know, and the dates and what we're going to do, you know, He said, yeah, you can come, but it's impossible this morning. I said, why, what's wrong? He said, fans, there's hundreds of fans outside, they're besieging the house. So I said, okay. I got there wasn't a fan in sight. Just Marc with the door open. I said, well, where are they? He said, oh, they're all hiding below the bridge by the railway line. There's nobody there.
I spoke to Marc about taking a year off because the single Truck on Tyke, I don't know, it peaked at number 20 or something like that. The writing was on the wall. We had to reinvent. And he protested and said, no, we have to do one more album for the kids. And he had this illusion that the kids was static, that they remained the same, that they didn't grow up. And but yet, you know, reality was telling us otherwise.
Zinc Alloy was the last studio album that I played on, and I kind of sensed a different atmosphere about everything. And I think at that time, I don't think June was on the scene anymore.
June went back to England on business, and while the cat was away, the mice would play.
It was the time when Gloria Jones came on the scene that she said, that's enough, I'm out.
Marc and Gloria Jones were like two mad children skipping through the door, you know, giggling and laughing, completely in love with what the other one was about.
It was never about the money, and it was about love for her. And that's this one thing she always tries to, you know, she lets me know.
All of a sudden, she became the Yoko in the band. And it changed the perceptions, the friendliness between people. Marc became more remote. He was in love.
Gloria Jones is not to be thought of as lightly. You know, here's the woman who wrote If I Were Your Woman for Gladys Knight and the Pips, you know, who wrote Tainted Love, recorded it first, you know, and did lots of Tamla Motown stuff.
Gloria Jones became involved, and that meant that the sound began to adopt a more soul/disco direction, or at least it was going even further into that way.
Some of the later stuff was really, kind of blew me away and blew my friends away, because it's kind of like a punk rock gospel, but rock and soul. It's kind of like merging these things together that no one really has done, and there's so much vibe there and like so much energy. And you know, the energy was probably coming from other places too.
I don't know whether he was doing it for Gloria's sake, or he was experimenting, you know, with this kind of soul-y thing and fused with what he was doing. I don't think that was ever going to work.
Change is coming just like the sun. Change is coming, you better run.
It all got a little bit tainted, the whole thing. It felt like it was all changing and coming to an end.
He didn't listen to me. Things were getting very ragged. The band was really disenchanted with him.
I did my last tour in Australia. The guys were going to fly down to Sydney from Brisbane, and I saw a plane coming in from England. I thought I'd just go home.
At the peak of T-Rextasy, the band was still making £75 a week, and they were promised, you know, they would share in the royalties. They were promised things like a motorbike each and things like that. None of this, you know, none of the promises materialized.
People change and different influences come into their life, and it's not for me to say, because I mean, I meet Gloria and Roland now and they're lovely, you know, we get on fine, it's fantastic, and that's all in the past. What happens, happens. I was glad I did what I did, and it was great, you know, and just all move on.
I didn't like where he was going, I didn't like where his head was. He was doing copious amounts of cocaine and drinking. He got very, very heavy, and he wasn't the Marc Bolan that I fell in love with. You know, he just turned into a monster.
Have you ever seen anyone do a low stop boogie? I'm not heavy. Ever seen anyone do that zip gun boogie? I'm now because
With the cocaine cut in, yes, you could be recording all night and you'd end up with a load of rubbish, and we could do the same track over and over.
Later on, he certainly became a very heavy drinker, far too heavy for his own good.
You can do everything you possibly can to try and deter it. I mean, I did with the alcohol, but if they want to drink, they find ways to do it. And the same with coke. It comes from within. You have to have that desire not to do it.
Marc was, I guess, struggling a little bit and didn't quite know which way to go, because at that time, of course, he didn't have Tony Visconti helping him.
He did leave everybody behind. I mean, he dumped Peel, he dumped us, he dumped June in time after she'd served her usefulness. I think he was a very sort of, he dumped Steve, he dumped Tony Visconti. He was a very exploitative person.
Every great star go through troughs. They go through ups and downs. You know, Marc was going through a down towards the end of his life.
There was a lot going on. I mean, there was also a vibe where my dad would spend a lot of time in California, and you know, there's a California soul. Like, there's a way of life when you live by the ocean, you know.
Marc was over there still trying to crack that American market, which was always seemed to be, you know, just a little bit further than his reach. He was there doing his stuff, but he didn't seem to, they didn't understand Marc Bolan. He was a little bit too complicated for them in his concept, and they wanted, you know, something easier to rock and roll with.
This is an illustration of one of the little columns I used to write for Marc in Record Mirror, which was a music paper of the time, which we used in order to try and keep Marc's profile alive while he was spending a lot of time in America. These are basically Marc's own words. I've been here a month now and I'm looking forward to getting back to England, especially after the exciting success of I Love to Boogie. I've been a US visitor so many times I now feel more like a time traveller than a rock star. I made my usual visit to Tower Records, as I always do before leaving the City of the Angels. It's a great store, claimed to be the largest in the world. My favourite section are the old blues records, of which they have hundreds. Stayed up late, as is my wont, being basically a nocturnal creeper, and laid down the Bolan bones as the sun rose on Bel Air. Flight flew as I got into the ancient sunny London. I felt all warm and patriotic when I returned, as I always do when I've been away for more than a month. I wheeled in Baby Roland. My main reason for coming in cooking is the release of my 20th groovy platter, Laser Love.
he just wanted that previous status to come back. You know, he had a good band around him, and he just wanted to recreate his former status in music, and that was his overriding passion all the time, was to keep on writing music and come up with good material, and he's successful.
Well, you damaged the soul of my soul. You pulled my love out by the roots, but I'm not such a bad boy.
He'd been through his Fat Elvis period, he was making groovy records, you know, so he went on and up.
Well, Dandy in the Underworld was his last studio album, and it came out in around 1977. And it's the last time I actually met Marc was when I went to Manchester Television Studios, Granada TV Studios, and he just started doing his own TV show.
Remember, keep a little mark in your heart, and we'll be back the same Marc time, same Marc channel. Meanwhile, this is Dandy in the Underworld. Prince of Bliss, born of none, born with strength from the heart of the sun.
I definitely think he was on the rise again. He had dropped his weight when I met him. He was curtailing his drug activity, and he looked pretty good. And his self-esteem probably shot up by having this television program. You know, that was really quite a nice thing to have at that stage when everyone kind of looked at him as being washed up.
The TV shows came about, I think, through Muriel Young, and she saw in Marc somebody who could get that young female audience that came home from school about 4:15 in the afternoon with nothing to watch on television, right? And Marc Bolan could bring on, with his pool, a lot of the young bands, and it was the time of punk.
He saw himself as the godfather of punk, but he picked that word up in America because, you know, he called himself a punk in America. I think it's an American slang word, and he was certainly talking about being a punk in '72.
And he did those shows, you know, the Marc Bolan specials, and he would have The Jam, Generation X, The Damned. He had David Bowie on his last show, of course. And I'd travel up to Granada with him on the train and everything, and he loved it.
He was always looking to the future and what was going to be the next, influence in music.
In '77, my ex-wife had a single, Mary Hopkin had a single, and she got to appear on Top of the Pops, and I accompanied her. And backstage, where the dressing rooms were, Marc was with Gloria Jones, his wife, and I was with Mary, and the four of us just bumped into each other. And there was like 1 second of silence, and then Marc just opened his arms and threw his arms around me and hugged me really, really tight, kissed me. Gloria was hugging Mary. I don't even know if they met before, but it was like all hugs and kisses, and like nothing happened. It was like the warmest reunion.
The last time I saw Marc, he insisted on giving me a whole lot of stuff. You know, he gave me a whole bunch of clothes, you know. He gave me some books. And kind of, not that I was, an ungracious receiver, but he kind of pushed them on me, you know. He gave me tons of stuff, you know. Well, I know why now.
I got a call at about 4:30 a.m. in the morning at my home from Reuters saying Marc Bolan and his wife had been in a car crash and Marc was dead. And I said, my God. It was a very sad moment. I mean, I liked Marc a lot. He was one of my clients that I would regard as a friend.
Many of refer to what was going to happen. Hubcap Diamond Star Halo, Tyrannosaurus Rex, the eater of cars. Summer is Heaven in '77.
The recordings he made before he died were starting to show promise of a stronger Marc Bolan, and he would have made movies. He probably would have directed movies. It was a lot he could have done. He wasn't even 30 when he died, you know. There's a lot he could have done.
It's like I knew my dad was a big rock star, but he wasn't around. But I had his music to share, and he was intelligent. He was a great person that wanted to do what he wanted to do, you know. But he loved to have fun.
It's very sad, of course, when people die, particularly if they are friends and you love them. Of course, it's very sad, you know. But we're only sad for ourselves, you know, because there he is, you know, he's jamming with Jimi Hendrix and Carl Perkins, you know, and what have you, you know, telling Jimmy how to play the guitar, you know.
Sometimes I wonder what I'm gonna do, but there ain't no cure for the summertime.